It's November 21st, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It's Dwyer. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Folks, there's a very important video, and let's get the timing. It's up right now. It's Ross Tucker's Part 1 video with Greg Cosell. Right? Greg Cosell, Howard Cosell's son, is a guy who breaks down football film. He's excellent at it. Now, while Greg doesn't make picks, right, he's not a gambler. He privately believes that it's impossible to forecast games. What Greg does do is talk about tendency. He talks about whether or not a quarterback is making the right throws. Now, importantly, this video has Greg breaking down Buffalo quarterback Josh Allen's 6-touchdown game, right, in which Allen also throws 2 picks. Now, just understand the break here with the public, right? You know, Josh Allen, 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. He's a great athlete. He looks spectacular. You automatically assume that this guy is one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, right? He is the reigning MVP. But in looking at that 6-touchdown game, this is the one from last week, Greg Cosell diplomatically says that that film's curious, that Allen is not making some of the right throws, right? He got results, but he, my word, wasn't efficient, right? There were guys open on film that he wasn't seeing. Right now, what I want people to do is to look at the highlights of yesterday's Buffalo at Houston game. Now, Josh Allen is under pressure, right? He's sacked 8 times. Houston does have a Super Bowl level defense. That's one of the secrets in football right now. Right? They have a great defense. They do have a pass rush. They were sending a lot of guys. Right? But what I want people to do is to look closely at the film. Look at the last offensive play that Buffalo runs. Right? I would argue there's a difference. There's a difference between Josh Allen and a quarterback like a Tom Brady or a Joe Montana. Right? Those guys make the right throws. In fact, a big secret to Lamar Jackson is that Jackson is spectacular against the blitz. Right? You send extra guys at Lamar Jackson, and Jackson makes you pay big time. Now, on that last play where Josh Allen throws a pick, if you look at the upper part of the football screen, the TV screen, right, they missed it on the telecast. Al Michaels, in general, is not critical of players. But understand, Josh Allen is rolling back. He doesn't have his feet under him. Right? He throws the ball to the wrong guy. In other words, there's a guy who's wide open at the top of the TV screen. Just look at the players, count the players. There's a guy wide open at the top of the TV screen who has a walk-in touchdown. Right? Buffalo should have won that game. Right? Josh Allen on a drive where he converts on a 4th and 27, right? Makes one of the worst throws of the year. There are Houston guys all around his wide receiver, the one he throws to. There's no one, I mean no one, no one who's around the wide receiver he doesn't throw to. Right? People like Greg Cosell are being diplomatic. Understand, the QBs who win Super Bowls, right, are guys who have a certain level of consistency. I'm not a big fan of Jalen Hurts, right? I'm not. But Jalen Hurts at quarterback isn't the gunslinger that Josh Allen is. If you're betting on Buffalo, you need to understand that just like Shedeur Sanders leaves some throws on the field, so too does Josh Allen. Don't be fooled by the highlights, right? You need to realize that, as Greg Cosell is diplomatically telling you in the part 1 of Ross Tucker's discussion with Greg Cosell this week, and again, this was before the video, before the game, right? Josh Allen is making the wrong throws at times, right? Cosell talks about how on a specific play, and the Bills got a touchdown on it, right? Josh Allen had a guy wide open. He looks at the guy on film, looks at the guy, and then makes a high-risk throw into the end zone where his receiver caught the ball. Right, folks? He doesn't have Michael Irvin, Jerry Rice, or Randy Moss to throw the football to. Right? This is a guy making high-risk throws. We praise him when it works. Right? But you need to understand, at times, he's not making the right throws. Right? We'll come online here and we'll criticize a rookie like Shedeur Sanders. And don't get me wrong, I have no political agenda to, bolster any quarterback. But the claim is that Shedeur Sanders, who's going to start for the first time in an NFL game this week, right? Shedeur Sanders holds the football too long. What I want you to do is to consider the idea that Josh Allen is a freak athlete. He is one of the best athletes at the quarterback position in the league. He has a great arm. He does a lot of things well. But, folks, he's volatile. In other words, he could win anywhere, right? But at the same time, he's not consistent. I want you to think about the quarterbacks in the league, right? Jared Goff is consistent at home, right? Just, Brock Purdy, and I don't think the Niners are in contention this year. But just understand, Brock Purdy, while not the athlete Josh Allen is, makes the right throws. That's why he gets along with Kyle Shanahan, right? He's a guy who can read defenses and know, Ricky Pearsall is open. That's who I'm going to. In other words, he's wide receiver agnostic, right? They asked Tom Brady, who was his favorite receiver? And Brady had a canned response. He said the open receiver, right? Understand, as great as Jerry Rice was, and he was spectacular, if you look at the ball distribution with the Niners, understand, running back Roger Craig one year broke 1,000 yards receiving. right? Russ Francis got a lot of balls. Brett Jones got a lot of balls. John Taylor got a lot of balls, right? At his heart, Joe Montana was a quarterback who found the open receiver, right? That's who he was. Josh Allen, to me, is what I call a Randall Cunningham quarterback. You might recall Cunningham throwing it up to Fred Barnett, former Eagle wide receiver, and Fred Barnett making acrobatic plays. Another guy like this, Fran Tarkington, right? You know, he would throw it up to Lynn Swann. As you saw the ball coming to Lynn Swann, think Super Bowl 10, you noticed the DB's right there with Lynn Swann. I mean, Lynn Swann would have to elevate and make dramatic plays. Right? John Stallworth, same type thing. DBs are right there. I'm telling you, Joe Montana looked like he was spending games playing catch with wide open receivers. You know, Josh Allen, the challenge that Buffalo faces is that they have a gunslinger at quarterback. James Cook, running back, superstar, could be, you know, looking like he did the first half against Houston. Josh Allen is going to come to the line. He's a feeling quarterback. He's going to come to the line and he's going to call audibles, right? He has a great back in the backfield. He's going to call audibles. Then, if you believe Greg Cosell, and I do, I'm sure many of you watching this video have had this feeling for years, right? As Allen fades back, he's going to see wide open receivers. He's not wired to automatically throw the football to them. He's going to make higher risk throws. When he first came in the league, and this is common with young quarterbacks, he threw a lot of picks. Look up his record. The difference between him and Peyton Manning, and let's not kid ourselves, Peyton Manning for years had Marvin Harrison, right? He had his share of, wide receivers. But if an Edgerrin James, a back who played with Peyton Manning, was on fire, Peyton Manning would hardly throw the football. Right? Peyton Manning was a guy who hit open receivers. Peyton Manning was a guy who, didn't need to put on a cape. Folks, the person putting the cape on Josh Allen is Josh Allen himself. So maybe on that last play, and don't get me wrong, even the Bradys and Montanas miss open wide receivers, right? But on that last play, folks, it's bad. This is the difference between winning and losing. A touchdown gives Buffalo that game. Houston, pedestrian offense with Davis Mills. In fact, pedestrian offense period this year wasn't going to go the length of the field, although you saw another problem with Buffalo, right? Buffalo really is subpar defensively, right? That's not a Super Bowl level defense, right? You saw they couldn't stop James Cook in the first half, right? So this is that rare week where you get Greg Cosell before a game criticizing a reigning MVP, and then the MVP validating the analysis in a nationally televised football game, right? All I'm saying with Josh Allen is there's going to be about a third of the time him on his A game, right? It's just like boxing. If he's on his A game, he can do things. He's kind of like Orlando Salido, who you might remember beat Lomachenko, right? He's like Teofimo Lopez, who you might remember beat Lomachenko, right? Beat Josh Taylor, right? That's the A game. But folks, there's at least a 33% chance that he's not on his A game. And just understand, he's going to make high-risk throws. He's going to miss open receivers, especially if the defense he's playing against has a pass rush, right? Buffalo's going to have to win games on the road in the playoffs. I'm not sure if Josh Allen can string together the number of playoff wins necessary, particularly if he doesn't get a bye in the first round as a top seed, to win a Super Bowl, right? You know, I would argue that you look at a Brock Purdy who looks boring, who gets injured, right? Understand, Brock Purdy has been to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen hasn't. Understand, when Brock Purdy left the field in that Super Bowl in overtime against Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, understand he did so with a lead. Right? While Brock Purdy looks boring, he's hitting the right receiver. Understand who Kyle Shanahan likes. He likes guys like Brock Purdy, Mac Jones. Right? Who you look at Mac Jones, not the strongest arm, but Mac Jones is hitting the right receiver. Right? The coach can actually draw up the offensive game plan. And understand that, you know, if some nondescript player is wide open, his quarterback's going to see them and throw the ball to them. Right? You need the quarterback who is wide receiver agnostic. Right? I would argue that Josh Allen might not be. He's the guy who ends up on the highlight reel, but who is missing a lot of open receivers. Let me close with this. Shedeur Sanders. You know, I want folks to think about how many U.S. senators there are. Right, folks? There are 100. Then ask yourself, how many starting quarterbacks are there in the National Football League? Folks, the number is something like 32. Right? It is more than twice as hard to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League than it is to be elected a United States Senator. Right? That's how rare the group of starters are. Now, what I also want people to consider is the need for backup quarterbacks in this league. Just think about the backups who have won games this year. Right? Joe Flacco, Marcus Mariota, Bissett. Right? There's a whole group of backups who have made themselves indispensable. Davis Mills last night. Right? My point on Shedeur Sanders, and he's going to play, is I know the world right now, after his performance last week, has been cringing. You know, wondering how Mel Kiper could think that Shedeur Sanders, who's not a great athlete, he's not a Josh Allen, he's not a Deion Sanders. Right? They're wondering how Mel Kiper could have thought this guy was a first-round pick. I need for folks to realize that others believe in him too. Right? Mike Lombardi, who's an excellent talent evaluator, believes in Shedeur Sanders. Right? Understand, when Shedeur Sanders got to Colorado, Colorado did not have a great offensive line. Right? This is not, one of these quarterbacks out of Ohio State, Fields, or, some guy coming out of a program who has a great offensive line. J.J. McCarthy, who then puts up numbers, has physical gifts, where the guy can show up to a private workout and throw the ball downfield. who's the right height, who is a better athlete, who scouts fall in love with, who really can't read defenses. Right? Again, that's J.J. McCarthy. Understand, Shedeur Sanders is different. This is the guy who shows up at Colorado, which was terrible at the time, and with a subpar line, he's making things work. Worse yet, while he threw a lot of screens, he also threw deep balls. So as we watch him this weekend, the public needs to consider the idea that you can have a great career as a backup quarterback in the league. Not only that, some backup quarterbacks, Geno Smith, right, received checks. Understand, Geno Smith had made over $10 million in his career before he became the starter of the Seattle Seahawks. Right now, of course, Geno Smith is making big money. Right? Marcus Mariota has made a boatload of money in his career. Joe Flacco has made a boatload of money in his career. Granted, Flacco won a Super Bowl as a starter. Right? So as we analyze Shedeur Sanders this weekend, right, just understand that there's more than one question. The big question is he a starting quarterback in the National Football League? That's the big question. Is he a starting quarterback? But there's a more foundational question, right? As fans of Mac Jones know, right? That foundational question is he a quarterback in the National Football League? Right? If he is, he could have a long career. He could make big money. Right? He could be in demand. Folks, Marcus Mariota is in demand. Right? Mac Jones is in demand. Right? Trey Lance, believe it or not, is in demand. Right? Think about Mac Jones for a second. Kyle Shanahan expects a lot from his quarterbacks. Kyle Shanahan isn't a defensive guy, he's an offensive guy who, when he was a coordinator, supervised people like Matt Ryan. Right? He's demanding of quarterbacks. Mac Jones was a guy he wanted on draft night. Right? The team ended up picking Trey Lance. Understand, Mac Jones plays for other teams, eventually ends up with Kyle Shanahan. The structure in San Francisco is a little bit novel. Right? The claim out here is that the GM, John Lynch, is really below Kyle Shanahan on the decision-making tree. I would argue that Mac Jones was a 49er because Kyle Shanahan wanted him. Kyle Shanahan broke down his films. Shanahan wants you to hit the open receiver. That requires you to keep your head as you fade back and to operate. Right? Understand, under Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy in the betting markets was one of the MVP favorites when he imploded Christmas night 2023, opening the door for the quarterback who threw for something like 5 TDs that night, Lamar Jackson. Right? Mac Jones is on the Niners. Kyle Shanahan just had him starting for a month or so. If Shedeur Sanders looks good enough against the Raiders, right? Sure, on Cleveland, he'll be in contention to be the starter. By the way, I didn't think Dillon Gabriel was that bad. Let's remember, these guys are rookies, right? You can't, I question the ability of second-year quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl. Right here, you have a guy who's a rookie. Not everyone is Jaden Daniels' rookie year. Right? I think there are guys who, if they stick around and have an opportunity to learn, they can actually be in demand. The truth about Mason Rudolph, I believe, is that as long as Mike Tomlin, who's been a head coach more than a decade and a half, is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mason Rudolph has an NFL job. Right? Because Tomlin trusts him as his backup quarterback. We now know that if Aaron Rodgers, with a broken wrist, in a very important game, because the Steelers are only one game ahead of the Ravens, can't go, Mike Tomlin is prepared to give the keys to the car to Mason Rudolph yet again. Right? Shedeur Sanders, folks, if he doesn't turn over the ball a lot, if he actually throws for yardage, Davis Mills, by the way, did not hit 200 passing yards against the Bill defense, with the Bill defense on the road, right? Non-elite defense on the road. Just to understand it, if Shedeur Sanders could put up Davis Mills' numbers, he could be in this league for a long time. And what folks need to do is to look at how much money good backup quarterbacks make in the National Football League. That's assuming, of course, that he doesn't blow the door off and put himself in contention for being a starting quarterback. Let me make another point, too. Cleveland's close, right? That Cleveland defense is one of the best in the league, right? Cleveland's defense at home is airtight. If they could find a quarterback who's even marginally above average, that team would be a great team to play for, right? Great fan base, high profile division, where the other three quarterbacks are Rodgers, Jackson, Burrow. Right? You're talking about 6 high-powered games against real teams. Let me just tell you, too, you see a tough division like that, and you realize whoever comes out of that division will be battle-tested for the playoffs. Right? Shedeur Sanders has an excellent opportunity here. But all I'm saying is, if he looks like Davis Mills, he doesn't have to look like Tom Brady. If he looks like Davis Mills, he can have a long career in this league. How many years has Marcus Mariota been playing? How many years was Geno Smith a backup? Jacoby Brissett, how many years has he been in the league? Right? Understand, too, some of these backups have top-end talent. I would argue that the backup on the Rams, Jimmy Garoppolo, is one of the better quarterbacks in this league. For those of you into analytics, look up his won-loss percentage. Understand, history changed on one play. The Niners have a lead in the Super Bowl. Garoppolo got them to that Super Bowl. He has Emmanuel Sanders open deep. He missed the throw. Kyle Shanahan has never won a Super Bowl as a head coach. He should have won that one. Right? Just understand, just like the Bay Area remains in love with Dwight Clark and the catch all these years later. Dwight Clark, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but he's a beloved figure in San Francisco. Right? There's another side to the coin where Jimmy Garoppolo missed a throw that could have sealed the Super Bowl. Niners were ahead late against Pat Mahomes, who else missed a comeback in Super Bowls, and the Kansas City Chiefs. He missed a throw. Understand, you have backups in this league like Jimmy Garoppolo, who has won a conference championship and who did not play that badly in the Super Bowl. Right? So, Shedeur Sanders, the door is open. This is the opportunity. Right? The Raiders, if you can handle Max Crosby and that pass rush, If you could get the ball into the secondary, you might be able to have success. Let's see how Shedeur does it. Just understand, in the background, you're going to have people like Greg Cosell analyzing the film. And he's going to be monitoring whether Shedeur Sanders is hitting the proper receiver. Right? The guy who is wide open in his progression. Or whether he's making throws into double coverage. Right? That group is a little bit wary of Josh Allen. Right? That play where Josh Allen throws his last pick of yesterday's game, mark that as Exhibit 1. Right? Revisit that play. There's a guy wide open. If Josh Allen throws him the ball, that guy has a walk-in touchdown. Josh Allen didn't see him. I believe Matthew Stafford, who has won a Super Bowl, would have seen him. Right? I'm not a big fan, again, of Jalen Hurts. I believe Jalen Hurts would have seen him. I believe Dak Prescott would have seen him. Right? I know Brock Purdy would have seen him. Right? Josh Allen didn't. Buffalo lost a game they should have won that they needed. Right? If you're betting on Buffalo, just understand, in a third of the games, Josh Allen is going to deliver wins, sometimes by himself. Right? You need to realize in another third of the games, he's going to get sacked a number of times, pressured a number of times. He's going to make throws where his feet aren't under him. Right? I don't think it's possible. Double check me on this. But I don't think it's possible for Tom Brady to get sacked 8 times in a game. Because I believe Tom Brady would make adjustments. Right? Brady would start to realize, okay, they're blitzing. Okay, this front four can operate without a blitz. Right? A Joe Montana would have a Roger Craig as a safety valve. Would know, okay, hike, this guy's practically unblocked. I need to get rid of the ball quickly. Josh Allen yesterday got sacked 8 times. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.